Welcome back to another episode of the Invest Like a Billionaire podcast. Today, we've got a top of mind episode for you, and we're going to be reacting to a question that we have been getting from our investor base and listeners probably multiple times a day for the past week or two. It's making headlines, right? The Middle Eastern conflict, the Israel-Hamas war, a lot of things we could, go into that around, but really a focus on energy because we've talked about energy a lot. This is a big area that we see opportunity, but how does this impact the thesis that we've been talking about for a while? So let's dive right in. This is the Invest Like a Billionaire podcast, where we uncover the alternative investments and strategies that billionaires use to grow wealth. The tools and tactics you'll learn from this podcast will make you a better investor and help you build legacy wealth. Join us as we dive into the world of alternative investments, uncover strategies of the ultra wealthy, discuss economics, and interview successful investors. Looking for passive investments done for you? With Aspen Funds, we help accredited investors that are looking for higher yields and diversification from the stock market. As a passive investor, we do all the work for you, making sure your money is working hard for you in alternative investments. In fact, our team invests alongside you in every deal, so our interests are aligned. We focus on macro-driven alternative investments so your portfolio is best positioned for this economic environment. Get started and download your free economic report today.
So as everybody's aware, Hamas invaded Israel, and of course it's the Middle East. And so, the major oil producing areas of the world. So the big question is, what's going to happen to the oil price? And I'll give you the short answer, and that is not yet. Not yet. It's going to affect the oil price, but could it? Absolutely. So just as a reminder, I don't know if anybody was around in 1973. I actually was, and Israel retaliated. They did a big counteroffensive, very similar to what's happening now in 1973, and it sparked the Arab oil embargo, where OPEC basically embargoed oil exports and put the world into a massive recession. Okay, so big question out there is, what are people thinking? What is Saudi Arabia thinking, right? Now today, OPEC is not the force that they were in 1973. So OPEC is still a large oil producer, but they're no longer the dominant force. They only produce, I think Saudi Arabia only produces about 15% of the world's oil. So I
think is an important point to make, because most people don't realize when we're talking different conferences and events, and you ask who's the world's largest oil producer, no one realizes that it's the U.S. I mean,
people still don't realize that. Yeah. So just today, the stats came out that the U.S. is producing 13.2 million barrels per day, a record. So literally, U.S. is setting production records right now. And the world's largest oil producer producing, I think it's about 40% more than Saudi Arabia. So people don't realize this. So the bottom line is, there's no question Saudi is a very big actor on the oil stage, but they're not the oil actor they were in 1973. So big question, what is Saudi Arabia thinking? So prior to this war, Saudi Arabia and Israel were having normalization talks. They were actually talking about, normalizing relations and, reapproachment, and super positive. It would de-escalate everything. And then this war happens. In fact, that could be one of the causes of the war, is that to basically, put a kibosh the talks between Saudi Arabia and Israel. So that's happened now. And there's also question on Saudi Arabia's leadership, right? So Saudi Arabia is in the middle of a transition, right? Where the new Saudi prince is kind of really stepping forward and taking leadership. And most people believe that he's kind of, ready to move on, and hey, let's move forward and not worry about, the previous conflict of the last decades. I mean, I'm oversimplifying, where the old guard, is very, very much opposed to Israel and all that. So the big question is, how much authority does, how much, I guess, say does the new guy have, right, relative to the old guy? So we'll see. And so far, it's pretty silent out there. So right now, it's not a big deal. One, because it's a little teeny war, relative to something like World War II or something. It doesn't create a lot of extra demand, right, for oil, number one. Now, if the entire world globalized mobilized their armed forces, including the United States, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Army, well, yeah, it's going to drive demand. But it really doesn't. It's a very small conflict that doesn't significantly impact demand. Well, what about supply? Will it change supply? And the answer is, Israel is really not an oil producer. They actually produce only about 6,000 barrels per day relative to, 89 million barrels per day global production. So,
yeah,
they don't count. So if their oil production gets disrupted, it's a nothing. But so they're around the Horn of Africa is the Strait of Hormuz, and then there's the Suez Canal, which cuts through Egypt, right through Egypt, and that's literally right where the conflict is. Gaza is right there on the border of Egypt and Saudi Arabia, so it's right there. So there's the Suez Canal cuts through. But again, so what you got to realize is the oil market is humongous, right? So roughly 5% of the oil transported across oceans goes through the Suez Canal. So again, it's significant, but it's not a complete,
right. It's not the majority of the supply.
And it's not an apocalyptic scenario, right? It's like, well, that would be a problem. So that's one, is the Strait of Hormuz or the Suez Canal. What happens there? Right now it's not closed. Could it be? Well, the Palestinians, Hamas is not very sophisticated militarily. They don't have an air force or a navy to go shut things down. And presumably that would be a very, kind of a lame exercise anyhow when you've got an American aircraft carrier there, right? What are they going to do? This is, the world's most powerful force, mobile force is sitting there. So I don't think they could do anything as is. But if it escalated, could there be big problems? And I don't think Saudi Arabia would actually want the Suez to be closed, because a lot of their oil flows through there to Europe and to the United States. So who knows? The other big question is Iran. So, and here's some of the conflicts. Well, anyone who knows the history of the Middle East, there's the Sunni and the Shia, and the Shiites, the Iranians are Shiites, and they're considered heretics by the Sunnis. Major heretics, right? It's not just hey, it's another denomination. They're very anti. And well, Iran is backing Hamas, but Hamas is Sunni. So, what's going to happen if Saudi Arabia sees a lot of Sunnis being killed? Honestly, I think a lot of it depends on, and I'm not a geopolitical commentator, but I think a lot of it depends on how brutal Israel's response is, right? If the world turns against them, I think we could see this escalate, and Saudi Arabia could get the world's attention to atrocities by squeezing the oil price. Could Iran invade or get involved in the conflict? It's a little hard to imagine that happening. They're already such a pariah. They don't really have the ability to project power militarily.
Right.
They're primarily a terrorist nation. They just fund these things. And again, they're anti-Sunni, which is Hamas. So, they're backing Hamas only just as a chaos creator. I don't think they're really excited about Hamas, right? So again, this is just my speculations. And then the other side, okay, that's the possible loss of production side. But what about the other side? It's possible, if oil goes into above the $100 range, that the Saudis would actually start, boosting production,
right,
bring it down. And so, who knows? Because They don't want, they like a high oil price because it's more money in their pocket, but too high, you push the world into recession, and then their demand
goes down and
crashes.
Pockets.
Right. So it's a little balance. And what's happening, ever since the shale revolution, in the mid 2000s there in America, we're no longer dependent on Saudi oil, and then neither is the world really. So who knows? So bottom line is it's a non-factor today. Could it be a factor? It definitely could, but it would require significant amounts of escalation, and so we'll see.
And even to your earlier point, if there is a significant amount of escalation, the impact, really from a supply standpoint, would be a lot less than it was in the 70s when the U.S. wasn't a dominant player in the space. And, if we have higher oil prices above $100, that, not really sure where that kind of price point to rebuild inventories and to stoke more, development, but it might actually create more supply, not even just in Saudi, but other places to start going.
But as we've pointed out in our megatrends talk, and if you haven't heard that, you're listening to this, you haven't heard that, you definitely need to go do that. Listen to the megatrends talk. So that even if prices spike up, we're not going to see an increase in supply globally, because there just is not a lot of capacity to do that. And why is that? Well, because the world has stopped spending money to develop oil fields. And if you stop spending money, you see declines because everything is being depleted. So,
yeah. Well, it's fascinating. Obviously, we're early kind of at the point of this conflict. And so a lot of things kind of to bear out here, but wanted to provide some early insights because we're getting a lot of questions. And so we do appreciate, those that have reached out, that are asking the questions. We love to be responsive when it's helpful. And hopefully this was, interesting. And if you haven't watched the full Megatrends presentation, we go very, very in depth on the energy case. And again, we're ultimately want to be sellers of oil. We think the probabilities of price going to the upside is very high and a good place to be, placing capital.
When you say sellers of oil, you don't mean selling oil investments.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. We want to be producing oil and selling it to the market.
It's if you're not playing in oil right now, you're going to regret it. You want to be in the oil space as an investor.
Yeah, if you want to just real quickly comment on natural gas, because a lot of times a lot of people conflate the two, or I would say oil and gas investing, and they're two kind of totally different commodities. And I do know natural gas has spiked a lot recently. Oil has remained high, a little bit higher than it was, before the conflict, but not dramatically. You want to just touch on natural gas?
Sure. Yeah. So natural gas is very different than oil. Very, very, very different. So natural gas is extremely volatile. It will spike up 100% and then drop 100%. I mean, it's over the map. And the reason is that natural gas is primarily a local commodity. It can't be shipped unless you basically put it in a giant freezer compressor, industrial, refinery size freezer compressor to turn it into liquid. And this is like taking oxygen and turning it into liquid. Okay. It takes an enormous amount of energy and there's very little capacity to do this. And then it's loaded into special tankers called LNG tankers that ship it and keep it cold. This basically refrigerator tankers. And it's extremely expensive, and there's very few of these things. And so natural gas really must be piped in a pipe. You can't put it into a truck. You can't really put it into a ship unless it's one of these specialized ships. You can't put it into an airplane. So all transportation, 100% of transportation is powered by oil, liquid oil, because it has extremely high energy density. So, a little gallon of oil or whatever has an enormous energy potential. Whereas a cubic foot of natural gas, you think about it, it's a big gaseous cube, a balloon full of natural gas, has far less energy. And it's got a lot of volume and not that much energy. So it's great if you can pipe it from where it's produced to where it's consumed. So most natural gas in America goes into industrial production. It's used to produce plastics. It goes into our power plants. We were laughing the other day at a guy, talking about, we asked him, where do power plants, he was talking about electric vehicles and where does it get his electricity? He says from the wall. And so where does the wall get its electricity? From the power plant. And where does the power plant get its electricity? He was befuddled. And well, it turns out it's primarily coal and secondarily natural gas. And so these natural gas, just big turbines that burn natural gas or boil, or create, steam from water and turn giant turbines that turn generators that produce electricity. So it is the, and the thing about natural gas production is it can be spun up and spun down. So these turbines, you literally just turn it on and it starts producing electricity. People start turning off their air conditioners, you turn it off. And so coal takes much longer to turn on and off. So a natural gas is the kind of marginal producer, but just your marginal supply in electric production.
Right.
And the other thing people need to realize, this is why, so natural gas, the price, I haven't seen what the price is recently, but a month ago it was, $2.50 in the United States. But it's roughly 4 or 5 times that much in Europe and in Asia, typically. And the reason is they don't have any of their own, and it has to come in through these expensive means. So again, it just, America is kind of the Saudi Arabia of natural gas. And coal, by the way. So very different commodities. If you believe in energy and you want to invest in oil, then I would suggest you invest in oil.
All right. That the other ones. Well, if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave a review, share with a friend. We always appreciate that. And please subscribe if you're not, and tune in for next episode later this week. Thanks so much for joining.